The first thing that kills you in an ice age winter is not the snow. It is the moment your body realizes nobody is coming to save it. No furnace will click on, no warm room is waiting behind a door. There is only wind, hunger, darkness, and a season long enough to erase anyone who misjudges it. And I think this is where we often misunderstand ancient humans. We imagine winter as weather. They experienced it as a test of intelligence. Around 20,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, the planet was about 6 degrees Celsius colder on average than today. That is the difference between a familiar world and a world where huge parts of North America, Europe, and Asia were locked under massive ice sheets. Sea levels were also roughly 120 meters lower than now. Britain was attached to mainland Europe. Siberia and Alaska were linked by the land bridge we call Beringia. The map ancient people walked across was not our map. Some of their trails, camps, and hunting grounds are now under the ocean. But here is the strange part. That frozen world was not empty. It was crowded with life that looked almost mythical. Woolly mammoths moved across the cold grasslands like walking fortresses of meat, fat, bone, and danger. Cave bears slept in dark chambers. Cave lions moved through the same landscapes humans were trying to survive in. To me, that changes the story. The Ice Age was not just a survival horror story. It was a resource puzzle. Every animal could kill you. Every animal could also keep you alive. So the big question is not simply, how did humans survive the cold? The better question is, how did a soft, almost hairless primate from a warm evolutionary background learn to negotiate with winter? The first answer is fire. But not fire in the cartoon version of a caveman holding a torch. Humans had been controlling fire long before the coldest Ice Age winters arrived. Evidence from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa suggests controlled fire use may go back close to 1 million years. By the time Homo sapiens and Neanderthals faced brutal glacial conditions, fire was not a lucky trick. It was inherited technology. And fire did more than warm hands. It cooked food, making calories easier to digest and more useful to the body. In deep cold, calories are not comfort, calories are survival. Fire hardened wooden spear tips. It pushed predators back from camps at night. It dried wet hides before moisture became hypothermia. It turned a cave from a stone hole into a livable room. Most importantly, fire changed time. Without fire, darkness controls you. With fire, people could stay awake after sunset. They could repair tools, prepare food, teach children, tell stories, and remember where the herds moved last winter. That is the part I find most important. Fire was not just heat. Fire was the first winter technology that allowed humans to gather around the future and talk about it. But fire alone could not save you. A flame can push back the night, but it cannot replace a body losing heat faster than it can make it. Ancient humans were not built like wolves, bears, or mammoths. We had no thick fur, no natural winter coat. Biologically speaking, we were tropical animals walking into a frozen world with skin that leaked warmth. So survival meant building a second body outside the body. The first layer was shelter. Caves helped because deep caves stay surprisingly stable in temperature, often around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius, even when the world outside is deadly cold. That is not cozy. But with fire, shared body heat, and protection from wind, it can mean the difference between a hard night and a final night. But ancient people did not just crawl into caves like frightened animals. At many Ice Age sites, archaeologists find planned living spaces, hearths, sleeping areas, tool-making zones, food preparation areas, and storage spaces. To me, this matters because it shows intention. They were not hiding from winter. They were organizing winter. And when caves were not available, they built their own protection. In Eastern Europe, especially at sites like Prehistoric in Ukraine, archaeologists have found houses made from mammoth bones, dating to around 15,000 years ago. Walls built from massive bones, tusks used as supports, animal hides stretched across the frame to block wind. This was not primitive, this was engineering with the materials winter left behind. Then came the layer people could carry. Clothing may be one of the most underrated inventions in human history. Genetic studies of lice suggest humans may have been wearing clothes regularly by around 170,000 years ago, because body lice depend on clothing to live. By the Upper Paleolithic, the technology was far beyond random fur. Bone needles found in Europe and Siberia were fine enough to sew fitted garments. At Sunghir in Russia, around 34,000 years ago, burials with thousands of ivory beads suggest clothing that was carefully made and layered. Inner layers held warmth close. Outer hides blocked wind and moisture. Hoods, pants, boots, this was survival design. But even shelter and clothing were not enough if the furnace inside the body ran out of fuel. In extreme cold, the body burns far more energy just to stay alive. That is why fat mattered so much. Fat has more than twice the calories per gram compared with protein or carbohydrates. A mammoth was not just meat. It was heat, stored in animal form. And here, the story becomes bigger than hunting. A group had to butcher, dry, render, store, and share. Meat could be cached in frozen ground. Fat could be stored in animal bladders or stomach linings. Dried meat mixed with rendered fat became something close to an Ice Age energy bar. So, when I look at these people, I do not see desperate wanderers. I see a living system. Fire was the heart, shelter was the ribcage, clothing was the skin, food storage was the stomach, and the group itself was the brain keeping every part alive. And once you see the group as the brain, the final piece becomes clearer. Ancient survival was not only about reacting to winter, it was about preparing for a winter that had not arrived yet. That may sound simple, but it is one of the most human things in the story. A deer can feel cold and move, a bear can follow instinct into sleep, but a human can stand in autumn, remember a bad winter from 10 years ago, and say, "We need more food this time." That is not strength. That is imagination under pressure. Across Ice Age landscapes, people did not wander randomly. They moved through seasonal worlds with memory and purpose. Reindeer shifted between ranges. Bison followed grass. Rivers brought fish at certain times. Human groups learned those patterns and built mental maps across hundreds of kilometers. Stone tools help reveal this. Archaeologists have found materials carried far from their original sources, sometimes over long distances. That means people knew roots. They knew where stone was, where shelter was, and where winter might be less cruel. To me, this is one of the most powerful lessons from deep history. A map does not have to be drawn on paper to be real. Sometimes a map lives in an elder's memory. Sometimes it is hidden inside a story. Sometimes it is taught by walking the same valley every year. And that brings us to something most people treat as decoration. Culture. Cave paintings at places like Chauvet, Lascaux, and Altamira are often described as art, and of course they are. But I think they may also be practical memory. They show animals with careful attention to shape and movement. Horses, bison, mammoths, reindeer. The creatures that mattered for food, danger, timing, and survival. Maybe those walls were not only sacred. Maybe they were memory made visible. The same may be true of music, ritual, and storytelling. Bone flutes, dating back around 40,000 years, remind us that people made sound together to hold the group intact when hunger, cold, and fear could have torn it apart. Because winter does not only attack the body, it attacks patience, it attacks trust, it attacks the belief that spring will come. And this is where the ancient lesson reaches us. We live with central heating, grocery stores, weather apps, medicine, and delivery food. But comfort can make us forget the skill that saved them, the ability to think ahead together. Ancient humans survived because they turned memory into planning, planning into cooperation, and cooperation into a future. So the next time you feel small in a difficult season, remember this. You come from people who faced winters that could kill them and still built fire, shelter, clothing, maps, songs, and meaning. If this story changed the way you see ancient humans, do not let it disappear after this video. Subscribe, share it with someone who thinks our ancestors were primitive, and leave a comment with one word: winter. Because the deeper we look into the past, the more we realize the first civilization was not a city. It was a group of people refusing to let the cold have the final word.